All right, we're going to go ahead and start. We had a little issue with the copier. It's printing more, but I think everybody in here has their copies, so that's good. Session 6. This is going to be the Gospel of John. We're looking at two chapters, chapters 11 and 12. Disbelieving Jesus. Disbelieving Jesus. We'll start off by making a couple of statements about disbelief. See if you agree with this. Disbelieving is, or let me put it this way, it's always easier to disbelieve than to believe when the majority of people around you disbelieve. You agree with that? And even close family and friends can lose their faith in you when you don't deliver to their expectations. You agree with that? So we're going to look at about 4 narratives. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. So raising Lazarus from the dead is the first one here in John 11. Jesus is in the wilderness. That's where we left him last time. He's where John the Baptist had been baptizing. He's gone back there. He's obviously teaching, and many are becoming believers there. That's where he's spending his time. Mary and her sister Martha send word to Jesus that their brother Lazarus is sick. And Jesus makes this statement in verse 4. This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. There's one handout left on that. Okay, there's some on the copier still. I had a hang-up going on, so I printed more. Terrell, you can have that. I'll send Lee up there to get some more. Just grab all that you have there. If it's still jammed, just forget it. Just get the stuff that has printed. Thank you. It's 2, a front and a back, and then a third one on front. Let me come back to that again. He says, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. He stayed in the wilderness for 2 more days, and he decided to go where Lazarus was. The disciples were concerned about the threats on his life. Look at verse 8 with me. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews were there, tried to stone you, and yet you're going back? Jesus responded with this, verses 9 and 10. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. Let me just ask you this. How many of you have stumbled because you didn't see anything, it was dark? How many of you stumble when it's daylight and you should have seen it? You okay? That's happening too, right? Okay. And after he'd said this, he went on to tell them our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep and that he needed to go wake him up. The disciples took this to mean, well, he's ill, he can get better. But Jesus corrected that with, no, he died. He says, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas encouraged the disciples to go back with Jesus so that they all could die together. Now, what I think Thomas is saying is not so that we can die like Lazarus died, but die with Jesus because there's the threat on his life and we're going to die too. Let's just go ahead and band of brothers, right? Okay. When Jesus got back, Lazarus had been in the tomb already for 4 days. This is a commonly missed trivia question, by the way, just so that you'll know. I don't know why even I have gotten this wrong. When you have a trivia question, how many days was Lazarus in the tomb? What do you think the most common answer is? 3. Because we think back to Jesus talking about the Son of Man being in the tomb 3 days, just as Jonah's in the belly of the whale, or big fish for 3 days, and 3 is an important number. It seems to come back up. I missed this at a Bible bowl one time, and I swore up and down, even though you're not supposed to swear, I swore up and down that it was 3. Then the judge pointed out the verse, and I think, 4? What's this indicate, by the way, that he's been in there for 4 days? Yeah. Martha ran out to meet Jesus when he's still just a little less than 2 miles out. She hears about it, but Mary stays back. And when she meets up with Jesus, there's this dialogue beginning in verse 21. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Is that a statement of faith? Let me just ask you that. Is that a statement of faith? Yeah. Yeah, it is. If you'd been here, you would have kept him from dying. She had faith in that. Now, she's disappointed that he wasn't there, but she did think that he'd be a difference maker there. Then, verse 22, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Is this a statement of faith? Yeah. She's upset. She's disappointed. You could have been here earlier to prevent it, but I still know that you can make things different. Keep that in mind. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. You know, we all knew that. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. I want to point something out there, and I didn't take time to put this discussion question, so I'll just go ahead and put this out there now. She's referring to the resurrection the way that you and I would refer to the resurrection. We're thinking final judgment day, aren't we? When Jesus comes a second time. And we're supposed to, as children of God, have faith that when Jesus comes, those who are dead in Christ rise first. But what Jesus changes about her thinking on that is, don't think that's out in the far distant future. It's in the present. I'm standing here in your midst. You see, the resurrection isn't about the event or a day. It's about me. That makes all the difference in the world, in my opinion. That I'm standing here now. And I can do something without putting it off for a future. And so he says, the one who believes in me will what? Live. Now I think what he's saying there is implying, I could be wrong, but I think this is a fair bet, implying that Lazarus was a person who believed in me. And that Lazarus will get to live. Not down the road, today. What do y'all think? Well, I mean, we know the end of the story. We know that's what's going to happen. Is that what he meant with the statement, though? The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. See, he had died, but he's going to live. And, verse 26, whoever lives by believing in me will never die. You see, the first part of that statement, I think he is saying, Lazarus was a believer in me. He's going to live. And although he doesn't say it specifically with clarity, he'll prove it with clarity, but he doesn't say it with clarity. He'll live today, even though he's been dead for 4. But then this next part is kind of towards Martha. Anyone who believes in me will never die. She's still alive and hasn't died. And then I want you to picture this scene. When I'm talking about encountering Jesus, this is that moment I like for you to visualize with me. Just like the blind man seeing himself in the reflection of the water that day. Remember? I want you to imagine how Jesus may be looking at Martha after he says, the one who dies is going to live. Because I'm the resurrection, I'm right here. And the one who believes in me will never die. And then he says to her, do you believe this? Because the blessing is whoever believes. Do you believe this? Can you picture that scene? That's powerful. You see, sometimes we glance over this, we read it, it's a story we all know, it's familiar. We kind of think about, okay, we know what happens. We know, get to the end, get to the part where Jesus wept. That's an important part. And then get to the part where Jesus comes up, right? This is an important part right here. What he's saying to Martha. I just love this. Do you believe this? In my Bible studies that I have all about Jesus, this is one of those stories where I ask the question after reading the story, is it important for us to believe this today? And the answer is a resounding yes, right? Amen? Am I preaching? Sorry, Jay, I'm preaching, aren't I? This is important. I just love getting into this, thinking about how she may have looked when he's pointing the question at her. Okay? So Mary, so they go to the tomb, and then Mary joins them because Martha has called out for her, and she joins them at the tomb, and she finds Jesus and says in verse 32, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. This is kind of like Martha, right? And the narrative says that when Jesus wept, in verse 35, that the people respond with, see how he loved him. There were others, however, critical of his ability or timing. Could he who not healed the blind man could have kept this man from dying? Or maybe it's the thinking, couldn't he have showed up earlier and kept the man from dying? Jesus was deeply moved when he approached the tomb. And when someone is deeply moved, is that observable? It normally is. When somebody, I may have a thought that you know nothing about. I can have an emotion and not show it or reveal it to you. But a person that's deeply moved, it's hard to hide that. I think in this encountering of Jesus that various people of this story are having, this is something observable, just like they see him weeping, and now he's deeply moved as he approaches the tomb, and he calls out, take the stone away. And Martha becomes concerned about what? The odor. It's been 4 days. And here was Jesus' response, verse 40. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? This is an ongoing dialogue with Martha about even Lazarus is a believer. He gets to live because I'm the resurrection and I'm in his presence today. He's going to get to live today. And anybody who's alive who believes me will never die. Do you believe this? And, you know, when he asked her, do you believe this? She had replied, I forgot to see this part. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who's come into this world. There's not anything here that's a statement of disbelief. From the get-go, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Belief. Now I know you can ask God and he'll give you whatever you ask. Believe. Your brother will rise again. And she says, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Belief. Everything here is belief, belief, belief. And when he asks her, do you believe? She says, yes. But when she says this in verse 40, or 39, but Lord, by this time there's a bad odor. Is that a statement of belief or disbelief? See the change? That means it's possible for you and me to believe, 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 believe. But somehow, either through our own rationalization or some thought that Satan introduces to us by some outside stimuli or whatever it is, just because we believe doesn't mean we will always be guaranteed that we don't have to worry about our belief system, that we always believe. There can be a believe. Okay, that's where I stop. How could anybody get to, this should have been a discussion question. How can anybody get to the point where I know you're the Messiah? I know you could have prevented my brother from dying. I know that if you wanted to, he could be raised up. I know he is going to be raised up in the resurrection. But I don't think you can take care of the odor. Why are we hung up on the small stuff? You know what I mean? Isn't this silly? You could raise him from the dead. You're the Messiah. You're saving the whole world. You just can't help with human odor. It's decay process. You can't do anything about that. It's going to stink. I don't get it with Martha. But here's the deal. I'm sometimes Martha. Are you? I don't know why, but I'm sometimes Martha. I get hung up on the whatever, the trivial stuff. Let's just kind of think this through. If he's alive, would it matter to you if he stinks or not? Laren's family pet, I don't know what breed of dog, it's a big old dog. He got into, Anatolian Shepherd. Oh, I didn't realize that was you, Logan. Logan and Laren had to take him to the ER the night because he apparently got into some poison or something in his system that wasn't setting well. He was having seizures. Stillwater ER. Y'all spent quite a bit of time up there and then came home having left him there because they had to run some tests and stuff like that. And next day or whenever it was, she is getting better and finally calls Laren and says, hey, you can come get her, and you won't have to pay for another night. So she wanted to use my truck because I have leather seats, because she sheds. Why am I saying he? She sheds. She sells seashells. Okay, she sheds. Oh, by the way, did I mention that she had an encounter with a skunk? But that didn't prevent them from taking her to the vet here and then to the ER in Stillwater. And it didn't prevent us from taking, it prevented Laren from taking her car, but not us taking my truck. You see where this is going? And she stunk, and she still does, but she's better. She's better. She looks good. So anyway, we didn't care about the odor as much as we cared about her health. Why would we care about someone's odor if they're alive again? Okay. Let's move on. Jesus tells Lazarus, come out. Oh, okay. He's telling the guys, move the stone away because it's in a cave, right? And after the little thing with Martha, come out. Lazarus comes out, and then he says, take his grave clothes off and let him go free. I don't want you to visualize this too much, but what's under his grave clothes? Huh? Yeah. Excuse me. So this is a good miracle. I mean, all miracles are good, but this is bringing someone back from the dead. This is a good one. Discussion questions. Why do you think Jesus delayed for 2 more days after hearing the news? And he stays there in that wilderness. Let me ask you this, and you are 100% correct, by the way. You got the A for tonight, okay? Sorry, she blew the curve, guys. Do the disciples know this? Not yet, do they? As a matter of fact, this is jumping ahead just a little bit, and I'm not sure if it's in this narrative or one of the 4 narratives tonight, but John, the writer of this, says of one of these aspects of Jesus, They didn't understand anything about what Jesus was talking about when he talked about I must be glorified until after he had died and resurrected and he was gone. And it was later they connected the dots. They're in the dark. The people in the wilderness where he's been teaching, they're in the dark. The people whom Mary and Martha have sent to give word to Jesus, they're in the dark. Is Jesus in the dark? When you think there's not a plan, there is one. When you think God's not listening, he has. When you think there's no hope, there is. Because he has the itinerary. 2 more days isn't going to affect Jesus at all. As a matter of fact, it will end up or result in having more believers from his wilderness ministry. And what was more important to Jesus at that time? To appease his good friends, Mary and Martha, to let them have peace of mind now about Lazarus when he knows later, I'm going to raise him from the dead, or the work of God being done on earth still? Because the ultimate work of God really was not about raising people from the dead who are going to die again. That wasn't the primary objective. The primary objective is get people to believe Jesus so that in the end they're raised to never die again. Guess what? Lazarus is going to have to die again. Isn't that a bummer? I mean, if he was a believer, as I'm implying that he was, suggested by, I think, what I'm reading in Jesus' words, he's either in glory or he's not in punishment or torments for sure. He's comforted like the other Lazarus that was in heaven that the rich man saw in Abraham's bosom. Figure of speech there. I know that's going on that way. But to bring you back from that to the world where you're back to chaos again and these 2 annoying sisters, I don't know if they were annoying or not. Thanks, Jesus. Thank you. The words that come to my mind is that famous statement by Rodney Dangerfield. I can't get no respect. You know, what a disappointment. What a disappointment, right? Question 2. How does Jesus' statement in verses 9 and 10 of this chapter compare to what he said in John 9 in regard to the blind man's story? And I'm referring to the discussion about night and day, light and dark. That creeps back in here again, doesn't it? And it comes up again in tonight's lesson. How do you think it compares? If you look at 9 and 10, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble. Does this sound like this is random, out of place? This is on the heels of when his disciples are saying, are you sure you really want to go back to Judea? They tried to stone you last time, and you're going back? And when Thomas says, well, let's go with them, he thinks they're going to all get stoned. Are you sure? And Jesus is saying, oh, there's 12 hours in the day. People in the dark stumble. People in the light don't. What does he mean by that? I think he means exactly what he meant back in John 9 and what he'll mean a little bit later when he says it again. I'm here right now. This is our opportune time to go. I'm not concerned about the people who are wanting to stone me. I've slipped away before. I can do it again. Is that right? If his time has not yet come, it won't happen until the time has come. And he knows when that is because he has the itinerary, doesn't he? He has that. And how soon? How soon? How far away is that, by the way, at this time frame? Not very far. We're up to the triumphal entry next. This is not very far. I mean, the next chapter, not 12, but 13, is the washing of the disciples. I can't even talk. Sorry. Let me slow down. My mind sometimes, it just goes and goes and goes. My mouth is saying, hold on, let me catch up. The washing of the disciples' feet is the upper room scene when Jesus predicts somebody here is going to betray me. It's the one who dips their bread in the same bowl I do. You see, that's the scene in John's gospel. What we're really looking at there is the focus on the washing of feet and how we ought to serve like Jesus did. But when you read this account of the others, we're all concerned about all the ones going around the room. Is it I? Is it going to be me? Am I going to be the one? And he leans over to Judas and says, what you're going to do, go do it quickly. That's that scene. This is how close we are to the garden arrest and the taking him to Pilate. Daylight was coming to a close, and Jesus is saying, I know the itinerary. We've got to do this. Okay? Why did Jesus tell his disciples that Lazarus had fallen asleep and that we got to go wake him up? Why doesn't he just, well, he's dead. Now let me go do my work. Why? Which is true, and why I think that's the delay. That's the answer to the delay question. Yeah. Yeah. Now this is exactly where I'm thinking on this, and I don't know if you teachers ever try this, but sometimes it's best that you're kind of elusive in your answer, or you allude to something. How many riddles do we have in the Bible? There's a ton of riddles in the Bible, aren't there? This is not so much of a riddle, but it's like, I'm gonna lead you down the garden path, but you're gonna have to work for the carrots. Okay? He's asleep, and we gotta go wake him up. Now, in one respect, I think this is a foreshadow of how we as Christians, according to God, how we as Christians ought to view death. Asleep in Jesus. Blessed are those who rest or who are asleep in Jesus. What do we say at a funeral? Rest in peace, right? It is a rest. That imagery is strong. How many of you looking forward to some rest? Eternal rest like that, right? And rest doesn't necessarily mean out of cognitive processing and you're just in dreamland or la-la land somewhere with not any... It means that you're now in a place where you have no fear, intimidation, no worry, no schedule, no baggage. You're in a... How many want that zone, right? That we all do. But he's letting them nibble on that. Let me give you a little bit of hint. And they're thinking, okay, he's going to get better. And Jesus says, no, I mean he's dead. That's what I mean. He's dead, okay? But this is to show the glory. Do what? Are you thinking of a Monty Python scene? You are, aren't you? Bring out your dead. How many of you seen that movie? I'm not dead yet. He says he's not dead. Well, he will be. I'm getting better. And they take the club and club him. Okay, I'll take him. Okay, demented humor. You got to watch In Search of the Holy Grail. One of my all-time favorite movies, and apparently Lee's too. Yeah. Let's go to question 4 right quick. Why would Jesus be glad that Lazarus had died? And this is, by the way, kind of a trick question. As a matter of fact, it's not even a fair question because he technically is not saying I'm glad that he died necessarily by itself. He says, for your sake, I'm glad I was not there. So let's correct that. The question was poorly worded. But why would you be glad about it in any way in respect to that whole thing? Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, just tracing through the Gospel of John, we've had water to wine, we have the blind man, we've had the guy whose son is healed, and we've had a few. Have we had a leper in John? We've had miracles that John may not have recorded here that we can read about in the other Gospels. And by the way, John says there's many signs that we don't even know about that they were not written down. But there's many miracles that have happened. But this one here, it's kind of like, I'm not trying to trivialize this, but it's kind of like for my next trick, you're really going to be impressed with this. Because he's really going to demonstrate a power that reaches far beyond what they could conceive or imagine. Had the child died? Well, I thought the news was that the centurion or whoever that was had figured when he asked when did he get better, it was at the exact moment that Jesus said, your child will live. Did he die? I didn't think he died. To answer the question, I can't with 100% say this is the first or if there were others. Heals the official's son. This is in chapter 4. Come down before my child dies, your son will live. And he took him at his word, and he gets news on the way that the boy was living, and when he inquired as to what time his son got better, they said, yesterday at 1 in the afternoon. And he realized that's the exact time Jesus said he would live. So he didn't die, at least not from what I can tell. But yeah, you're right, because there's more belief that can be had among people there. What did Thomas mean in verse 16? And what does this tell us about him? Well, verse 16, it's where he says, let us also go that we may die with him. What does that tell you about Thomas? Good old doubting Thomas. Huh? I'm not sure. I don't think so. He's what? He's not Ruth? No, he is Ruth. When Ruth says to Naomi, where you go, I will go, your people, my people, Thomas is telling the other disciples, let's go with him. We're with him. We're all together on this. But he doesn't think it's going to be a good outcome. But he is Ruth, if you're using that. He's not quite the doubting Thomas we later peg him out to be, is he? In regards to his commitment level to Jesus. Sam? Mm-hmm. Right. But he's also a ramrodder, trying to get everybody else on board. Let's all go. Yeah. One for all for one. Okay. What level of faith do you believe Martha had after Jesus asked her who he was? Well, I kind of answered this already, so I'm going to kind of just summarize that and move on because of time management. She had a belief statement, belief statement, belief statement, belief statement, and there a little bit later she has a disbelief statement. But this question here, the answer to that is she was a believer. She had faith in Jesus. What are Mary's thoughts when Jesus finally showed up? Go ahead, Sam. think even to us, we are all in her shoes too. We can say we believe. We sing the songs of belief. We preach about it. We hear it. We tell people we believe. But we have framed it the way we think it'll go down. And we have a certain expectation of how it will all happen. And is it possible that some of the details we may have wrong? I think that's a plausible thing about us. And we got to be careful about what we expect. We say we believe in Jesus. That doesn't necessarily mean that he or God is going to do exactly the way we think it's going to happen that way. It can happen totally different. And he can do something that you didn't even consider being done. I guess I'm trying to say with God, we can expect the unexpected. I mean, what after all did Paul pray about in Ephesians 3:20? Now to him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can think, ask, or imagine. Out of our realm of even consideration, in other words, according to his power at work through us. That's the prayer Paul had. It's the prayer we should have. Know somebody with cancer? Can God heal that person of cancer? I know he can. I can't tell you that he will definitely heal this person of cancer, but I know he can. And doctors could give you the worst prognosis ever. There's no surviving this. There's no coming back from this. God's not going to be put in a box like that. Am I asking us to have unfair expectations of God? Am I asking us to go into a selfish mode that, well, God, you did this for a person over here, but why can't you do it for a person over here? And we might feel slighted because it looks like or appears maybe he's favoring people. We get in all these rationalities, and God doesn't operate any way that we would think that he should or would. I don't know. Tara, what do you think? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Who is it that had the book in the series called Experiencing God? Is that Eugene Peterson? Or is it, no, it wasn't him. His last name had Black in it. Blackburn, Blackberry, Black. Who am I thinking of? Do y'all know the experience? I don't have my phone on me. Can you Google Experiencing God Bible Study Series? I got to figure out who that was now. But in my effort of this type of class, what I wanted to do was look at these narratives of John where you had people's impressions of Jesus whenever they encountered him. So I want to make sure that we cover all the bases, all the players. We've looked at Martha, we've looked at Mary, we've looked at the disciples, we've looked at the critics. We kind of halfway considered what Lazarus thinking, but this goes back to this questions 10 and 11. Let's look at 10. What do you believe is going through the minds of the ones who are told to take the stone away? We don't know who that is. It could be one of the 12, or it could be somebody else related to the family. We don't know. We're not told. But what could be happening? Well, you got any clothespins to put on my nose? What's going on there? Just imagine that. Did you come up with it? Blackaby, Richard Blackaby. Because that Bible study series kind of approached that study of God, experiencing God. And sometimes I think we shy away from experiencing God. No, let's just stick with what we know. Because it feels subjective. And subjectiveness can get us in trouble, which is true, by the way. But we should never allow the reality of God in our lives rob us of feeling Him and knowing Him in a personal way. Sam? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. The standard answer is, oh, he wept, because he wants to show us he has the human side of him, which is true. I mean, he does, and he weeps and mourns because that's what we as humans do. But then it doesn't make sense to us in the long run, knowing, well, he knows because he has the itinerary. He knows he's going to raise him from the dead. Is he still going to weep? Yeah. But I like your thinking about the weeping is over those who, even in the face of this miracle, are still not going to believe. Yeah. Because we have, just a little bit later, we'll get to it, people who believed, but they wouldn't publicly profess it because they love human praise more than God's. Cheryl? This is getting ahead. Let's go ahead and get there. Chapter 12, verse 39, which is a quote from Isaiah, and it says it's being said that this is fulfilling what Isaiah said. For this, the verse 39, and we'll get to that story hopefully. For this reason, and look how it's worded. For this reason, okay, let me back up. Verse 30 said, this is exactly what you're talking about, Terrell. Verse 30 said, even after Jesus had performed what? So many signs. That's your question, right? In their presence, they witnessed this. They saw it. They can't deny what happened. They can't go home and take, what is it, the men in black people had, that little flashlight that flashed your memory away, and okay, that's out of our mind. They couldn't do that to each other. Did that really just happen? Yeah, that happened, okay. They still not, it says they still would not, that's key, would not believe in him. And look at this, and that was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Now look at the next verse. For this reason they could not believe. One says they would not, and then later it says, and they could not. And I take that to mean even if they had wanted to, they couldn't because of their predisposition already set. Kind of going back to this thing that God knows, Jesus has the itinerary. God also knows the outcome of our decisions. And it's not that you're predestined, but he has foreknowledge. Doesn't that make sense? And there are scriptures that talk about God, and a lot of people cringe when I say this, but it's a Bible verse. God gave them over. And I know what people are hearing. God gave up on them? that is what that means, but be careful here, because he'll only give them over when he knows they have given up on him to the point that there is never a return. Does that make sense? So God doesn't give up on you. I don't want that to be the message. But you can get to the point where when God knows you've arrived at that point in time that he now knows you're never going to have the belief, he not only does it say in Romans 1 as an example where he gave them over, and it says it several times. There's another verse, and I don't know where it is, says he'll even encourage the distorted image by sending them strong delusions. That's pretty bold. Does that help? I mean, that fits perfectly to the question you're asking. Let's move on. We got 10 minutes to get the other three narratives. But these are kind of short and sweet. Well, kind of. The Jews in Bethany, chapter 11, verses 45 through 53. Okay, well, it helps if I go back to the right chapter, chapter 11. Here we are. And 45 through 33. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. So, okay, there's those who have come and they saw it, what Lazarus is alive now. Some of them went and told Pharisees what Jesus had done. That caused a stir in the Sanhedrin council. Look at verse 47. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Now, I don't know if it was last week or the week before. This is exactly one of the optional answers I offered as to why they kept wanting to snuff out Jesus. Because he was a threat to their way of life. And why I also said, and I think it's been more than a couple weeks ago actually, why I would also say, I really don't think these Jewish leaders wanted the Messiah to come within their lifetime. I really don't think they did. Even though it was to their advantage to some degree that there were many there that thought the kind of Messiah that would come would liberate them from Romans. But here is a statement that the Sanhedrin is making of saying, we know if this goes on, the Romans are going to take it away from us. They don't think that they can defeat the Romans. They just want to hold the Romans at bay. That's their intention. That's the way I'm looking at it. Yeah. Because the Romans are actually helping them, empowering them. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. They begin to plot to take his life. Discussion questions are, why would some feel compelled to tell the Pharisees about what Jesus had done? I mean, there's always tattletales. I mean, drive a school bus and you're going to find that out. Kids, right? Siblings. Mm-hmm. For some reason, there are people who think that there's an award if you go and snitch on somebody first. I'll be the first one to tell. I'll be the one. I'll be the, what do we call it? The Enron thing, the whistleblower. I'll be the whistleblower. Why is there this thought that we get something in return? Oh, there's a book deal to be had maybe. I don't know. This caused a stir with the Sanhedrin, okay, and they begin to plot to take his life. Okay, so what are the members of the Sanhedrin concerned about? Kind of already answered that. What does Caiaphas believe on the matter? This is interesting, isn't it? When you see what Caiaphas says, excuse me, verse 49, he was the high priest that year, spoke up, and he's talking to his fellow Sanhedrin. You know nothing at all. Okay? I mean, what kind of chief priest are you if you're saying, you guys are a bunch of idiots? You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. And what he means by that is, it's just best that he's collateral damage and we get to keep our kingdom. That's exactly what he's saying. And verse 51 says why he said it. He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he had prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. This is just catalyst prophecy to initiate the plot. Do you like my gesture there? To initiate or should I say the plot, all right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Judas Iscariot, chapter 12. 6 days before Passover, they're in the home of Mary and Martha in Bethany, and is it Mary anointing his feet with expensive perfume? And Judas objects, verses 5 and 6, chapter 12. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, because he was a thief. He's not Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. He's in it for himself, right? As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Skimming the till, as they say. Okay? And Jesus replied, leave her alone. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you. You'll not always have me. Discussion questions. What did Jesus indicate about Mary's actions to Judas? Not her actions to Judas, but what's he telling Judas about Mary's actions? Yes. Let me say it this way. We keep saying this. Jesus knows the itinerary. And I think Mary has got a sneak preview of it now. And probably Martha too. And it's interesting that in the Mary-Martha thing with the Lazarus, Mary really only has that one time at the tomb. If you'd been here, he'd still be alive. It's Martha that's been the most vocal. But Mary is quietly in here using the perfume that is expensive. Judas is correct. This is expensive stuff. But she understands the meaning behind it. The other question is, what did Judas really care about? Yeah, I've been helping myself to that. And, his smoke screen, that's a smoke screen about the poor. And by the way, what did Jesus mean about the poor in his statement? Is he dissing the poor? You'll always have the poor with you. This is an interesting thing. I do believe Jesus is all about his body, his church, ministering to the poor, to the brokenhearted, to the less fortunate, to the diseased, the imprisoned. I honestly do believe that. But Jesus' mission for his church is not to get poverty solved on earth. That's not his mission. I believe sometimes we think it is. And I don't want to get political, but I believe that some Christians have bought into the socialistic ideology that should be the mission of the church, but it's not. Do we give aid to the poor? Yes. Render help and relief to those who are hurting? Yeah. But you always have the poor indicates to me that Jesus is not so much interested in about people's bills or their downfall or their lot in life as much as he is about their soul and where it's going to spend eternity. And that's the more important thing. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. And I want to make this clear since we're broadcasting. I am not totally against the overall concept of the gospel being social. We refer or label social gospel. And I do think there's a lot of dangers with it that's in that social gospel movement. But we ought to be, it's the church's mission. It's not government's mission to give aid to the poor and to the hurting. This is the church's mission. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to step back out of political. That was not 5 minutes between those bells. Well, I can't get there from here. Take this home, sit down with your spouse, or get a nice cup of coffee in the morning maybe. Do this crowd in Jerusalem. Go through this unbelievers and non-committers section. And let's just conclude with the 3 concluding points. We will always be surrounded by unbelief. I don't care where you are. And if you think there's not unbelief in the church, then I've got oceanfront property in Arizona, which actually there are some good shorelines in Arizona, and we have to safeguard our faith and install measures that will help solidify our loyalty to Jesus, since we will be surrounded by so much great unbelief. And we should never think that faith is always going to be easy to have and to profess. We can be like Martha. I believe, yes, I believe that. I don't think that can happen. Be careful where we might try to draw the lines. And that's your lesson for tonight. You've got, I guess, not homework to do, but extra stuff you can do. Yeah. All right. We'll sign off. Thanks for joining us. We'll be here Sunday. VIP dinner is coming up soon. Sign up on the list. That's the 19th. And this is Super Bowl weekend coming up, and we are here at the building, I think 5. I think the game's 5:30. So snacks, games, a lot of laughing, maybe even tears. Do we have any Philadelphia Eagles fans in here? Because you're going to be crying.